Let's begin.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 1. The Ouija board murder.
When I was younger, I went through a phase of being very much into Ouija boards. I was fascinated by the supernatural and was quite disappointed that nothing paranormal had ever happened to me. That all changed during a sleepover that I attended in the 5th grade. Myself, along with 5 or so other girls from my class, were staying the night at this house of another classmate. Nothing of significance happened until later after her parents had gone to bed. We had played Light as a Feather, Stiff as a Board, and Bloody Mary, but nothing scary happened. So we had essentially given up on our mission to make contact with the ghost or entity, until one of the girls, who was my best friend at the time, smiled and slowly pulled something out of her bag. It was a Ouija board. The host of the sleepover was instantly upset at the sight of the board and demanded that it be taken out of the house. We asked her why was she so mad about it, but she didn't give us an answer. She just insisted that we put it away, or else her mom would freak out. Her mom wasn't really religious, so we just assumed that it was a superstitious thing. The girl who brought it would not accept no as an answer, and insisted that we played with the board and try to make contact. No one except for me, the girl who the board belonged to, and the sleepover host really believed in ghosts. We had asked several questions, and while the pointer did move, they attributed it to being me and my best friend moving it. They said the pointer was moving because someone that's touching it subconsciously moved it. That could have been true, so we decided to ask a question that I and only I knew the answer to. I intentionally did not put my hand on the piece to try and prove a point. Suddenly, the piece started moving. Immediately, it had spelled the answer to my question. The answer that no one else knew but me. I quickly yelled out, "That's correct." It was my mom's birthday. That's when my friend's mom came into the room. I'll never forget the expression on her face. It was one of pure terror and absolute shock. I knew my friend's mother very well, and never before then or since then have I seen her so profoundly upset. She was so mad that she actually called everyone's parents at 2 o'clock in the morning, insisting that our parents come pick us up. Ouija boards usually have some sort of sun and moon type thing in the top corners. The one we played with had an open eye in the left upper corner and a closed eye on the right. When we went back to pack up our stuff, we noticed that it had moved from the letter we had left it on, and it was slightly over the open eye. My friends and I looked at each other and decided it would be best not to share this with anyone else, so as to not cause unnecessary panic. When school started on that next Monday, we all ran up to the host of the sleepover and began asking what the hell happened and why her mom got so upset. She was visibly shaken and did not want to talk about it. But after being nagged all day by everyone who had attended the sleepover, she finally cracked. The story went that when her mom was in high school back in the day, she had this group of friends that she hung around with constantly. 2 members of their group were dating. One day, when they were seniors in high school, they decided to play with a Ouija board. They decided to ask it the one question that you're not supposed to ask. When am I going to die? One by one, the Ouija board gave them all dates. The couple that were there, both dating, got the same exact date. For a while, everyone kept the dates in the back of their minds, but as the years went on, they lost their contact with each other. The couple, on the other hand, stayed together throughout college, and one weekend, the boyfriend took his girlfriend on a trip with the intention of proposing to her. They were both murdered. A murder that to this day has gone unsolved. It happened on the day that the board had predicted they would both die. Now, I have no way of verifying the authenticity of her story, but based on the reaction of my friend's mom and the manner in which my friend retold the story to us, I have no doubt in my mind that this is true. It has now been 15 years since this has happened, and nothing has happened in regards to the pointer resting on the eye. I now refuse to participate in Ouija boards, and I strongly urge anyone who expresses interest in it not to as well.
Scary, true paranormal story number 2, The Wendigo.
When I was 8 years old, me and my parents lived right down the road from my grandparents' house in a small town. It was getting close to my 9th birthday when I came up with a bad form of strep throat. I was severely sick and could barely speak. I started experiencing cold sweats for the first time and could barely pull myself out of bed just to try and use the restroom. I was absolutely miserable, and of course, being as young as I was, I didn't take the pain very well. My poor mother was at loss of what to do, with her working and my dad working at night. The first day I was sick was on a Tuesday, and my birthday would fall on that following Friday. My dad stayed up most of the day with me. He made me food, let me sleep in his lap on the couch, and gave me medicine. But on the second day, my grandmother had called and offered to let me stay at her house so my dad could get some sleep. He said yes to this and woke me up around 7 o'clock that morning to drive me up to my grandma's house. My grandfather also worked at this time too, so he was already gone to work when I arrived. I don't remember too much of the early morning. I probably just slept in my grandmother's bed, tossing and turning. When I woke up feeling extra bad, she would encourage me to swallow my awful tasting medicine a little more gently than my dad did. She made some tomato soup for me to eat. It was the first time since I had gotten sick that I actually had an appetite. I should mention, my grandmother had this cute terrier dog named Samson. He was very quiet, not like the usual terrier dogs, annoyingly barking all the time. Samson came into the room and curled up next to me as I dozed off to sleep. I don't know exactly when I woke up, but at some point it had to be early afternoon or lunchtime because I could hear the TV faintly from the living room on some game show. My grandmother had a ritual of eating her lunch while watching a game show. It was The Price is Right. I was trying to fall back to sleep when I had gotten this really bad headache. I was on the verge of slipping back to sleep when I was jolted awake by someone calling out to Samson from the living room. Samson curled up next to my feet, perked up his head, but didn't move. I knew I had heard his name being called too, but it was odd he didn't respond. Samson, my grandmother's voice, called out again. Samson still didn't run out of the room to her. I was confused as he was very obedient to my grandmother. He was almost frozen still, staring at the cracked open door, but making no attempt to go to her. She called out maybe 3 or 4 more times. "Samson, come here." Then I got curious. I remember flipping the covers off me. My clothes were sticky with sweat, and I just generally felt uncomfortable and groggy. I stumbled out of the room, wiping my eyes, asking Grandma, "You need Samson. He's in your room with me." I made it to the living room, and I had to do a double take. The TV was still on and blaring. There was a bowl of soup sitting on the coffee table and an open Pepsi next to it. But my grandma wasn't anywhere in the room. I thought maybe she's in the bathroom. I crossed the room and went past the kitchen. I got to the bathroom door, which was shut. I then knocked. No one answered, so I slowly opened it, and no one was in there. The house seemed to be empty. It's not a huge house either, so I covered all the rooms. My first reaction was to get scared. I could clearly hear my grandmother calling for the dog, but she's not anywhere inside. I remember my hands and feet getting all tingly. I started shouting for my grandma, but my voice was just echoing through the small, cramped home. Samson had gotten up at this point and was sitting near the couch looking completely undisturbed. I fumbled for the remote and turned off the TV. I yelled for my grandma to the top of my lungs, which you can imagine how painful this was for a scratchy, infected throat. The worst part happened next. I can't explain the fear I felt. I heard her shouting my name back, clear as ever, like she was standing only 1 foot away from me, but I could not see her. I started crying, now scared out of my mind. I thought maybe it has to be a ghost. I grew up with scary ghost stories courtesy of my dad, of course, and I'm convinced now. I remember saying to myself, I'm in the room with the ghost. Then she, or whatever this was, proceeded to call my name again, and then there was a second voice, definitely not my grandmother's. It was deeper and more masculine. It was absolutely terrifying as it shouted, "Come to the front door." I did not do that. Instead, I made sure to run back to my grandparents' bedroom, lock the door, and pick up the telephone on their nightstand. I called my own home phone, and my dad's sleepy voice answered through a barely comprehensible voice. I managed to croak something like, "Daddy, there's someone in the house, and I can't find Grandma. She's gone." My dad, of course, said he jumped out of bed, grabbed his Swiss Army knife he kept in a drawer next to the bed, and ran down the road to the house in his PJs with bare feet. He ran up to the front door and jiggled the handle. It was locked. So he made his way around, and since he knew the garage code, he just punched it in, walked inside, and did a quick sweep of the rooms of the home. Everything showed that no one was there. It's not like there was anywhere to hide. I ran out of the room once I was sure he was there and began bawling and crying in his arms. He kept reassuring me there was no one here, then asked if I did know where Grandma possibly was. I said I hadn't seen her. I had woken up to her calling Samson, the dog, but she hadn't been anywhere. This was back when cell phones were definitely around, but not everyone had one. My grandparents certainly wouldn't have been buying them anyways. My dad had one, but not on him at the time. I could tell he was trying to keep calm, so he just said we would need to go back home. I was sure he was probably going to call the police at that point, just because my grandma still had not popped up and her car was still in the garage, as if she just left on foot. As we were walking out of my grandmother's house, we hadn't even made 2 steps out of the doorway when my grandmother's neighbor's house door opened and my grandma was strolling out chatting to the neighbor. She saw my dad and then me crying my eyes out and immediately ran over to see what was going on. She was super apologetic. She said she'd stepped out right when she heated up her soup to go see her neighbor who called her about looking at something my grandma was going to buy. My grandma had figured I was asleep and she'd only be gone for 10 or 15 minutes. At first, people may have assumed I was feverish, therefore delusional, but I still stand by what happened. I know for a fact I was definitely alone in the house, except for Samson, but the voices I heard were real. For a while after that, I was hesitant to go back to my grandma's house. I later read stories at school about a Wendigo or certain creatures that would disguise their voices to lure people. This was the closest explanation regarding what I had heard. I never shared this with anyone. I'm close to my 20s now. I shared this story with my grandpa, and my grandfather told me something that gave me shivers down my spine. He said, "Honey, those voices you heard, I hear them every night. I just don't say anything to anyone."
Scary, true, paranormal story number 3. Prove it.
This story is about an experience I had using a Ouija board when I was in the 7th grade. I'm now 28 years old, so it was quite a while ago. I don't remember some of the smaller details anymore, but everything I'm writing actually happened, and this story is 100% true. I'm the kind of person who would probably never have believed in anything paranormal unless I experienced it myself. So in a way, I'm glad that this happened to me when it did, as it opened my eyes when I was still young. This all took place at my friend's, Mark's house. On the weekend, me and 3 of my friends had been hanging out at Mark's house all afternoon. Mark's parents were going out all night, and they had a rule that no friends were allowed over when they weren't there, so we were all getting ready to leave. Mark's parents were both doctors and insanely strict. He used to get grounded for weeks at a time for the most ridiculous reasons. Needless to say, we were all pretty surprised when his mom came upstairs and told us that we could all sleep over that night as long as we were good. In those days, having a house free of parents was a huge deal, and we were all really excited. Before I go on, let me explain the layout of the house really quick. It's in a nice neighborhood. Mark's house had a garage in the front, and there was a walkway along the side of the house that led to the front door, which was in the center of the house. When you walked in their house, there was a small guest bedroom to your left and a garage at the far end. To your right, there's a large open family room. Upstairs basically consisted of 2 bedrooms in the far right end of the house and a master bedroom right above the garage. So back to the story. After his parents left, a few of us ran home real quick to get a few things. We all lived pretty close, and I could skateboard from home in about 5 minutes. When everyone returned back to Mark's house, one of my friends had brought a Ouija board. We were all really eager to try it. We went upstairs to the game room to set it up. Mark locked up the house and turned off all the lights downstairs. When everything was all set up, the house was pitch dark, except for the ceiling fan light we had on so we could see what we were doing. I can't remember the specific questions we asked or the responses we got, but I do remember 2 brief interactions. By the time we were all into it, the questions were more provocative. I remember immediately feeling weird and I was getting nervous. The responses weren't the kind typical 7th graders could come up with, even if they were controlling it. The responses were getting more menacing and everyone was getting scared. You could see it in their faces, but nobody wanted to show it. Then, my friend Brad, who had been asking most of the questions, screams out, "Prove it. Do something." Then, there was a few seconds of pure silence. Just as I was starting to feel relief from nothing happening, there was a gut-wrenching shriek from the cat downstairs, directly below us, followed immediately by the sound of shattering glass on the floor. I can't explain the fear I had at that moment. The next thing I remember was we were in the back of the game room. All you could see outside the room past the walkway was the top half of the stairway leading upstairs. We watched those stairs for what seemed like 30 minutes without saying a single word, hoping that no one would come up those stairs. At some point, we decided we had to go check out what happened. We all grabbed whatever makeshift weapons we could find and slowly made our way downstairs as a group. When we got around the corner of the staircase, the first thing I saw was the cat. It was still hissing, back arched, and scared to death. It was on top of a cabinet, about 10 feet from the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a giant puddle of water and shattered glass. It was one of those snow globes, the ones that are about the size of a small watermelon and are about 10 to 15 pounds. As soon as we all realized what happened, it hit everyone that this very large heavy snow globe had been on the cabinet far from where the cat was standing, which was 10 feet away from where it was smashed on the ground by itself. Before this could even sink in, music started playing in the kitchen behind us. At this point, we were all terrified. We ran into the kitchen and turned on the lights, and in the middle of the kitchen was one of those Santa Claus toys that shuffles around and sings a song when you turn it on. Mark runs up and grabs it, and he started flickering the power switch, but it did not turn off. It wouldn't turn off. He quickly hits it again and again against the counter, and when it still wouldn't turn off, he then threw it as hard as he could on the ground. When the toy broke, the battery cover flew off, and what I saw next with my own eyes haunts me to this very day. The toy had no batteries. The next thing I know is we were all upstairs in Mark's room. The door was locked and we were all praying. Nothing else happened after that, but needless to say, Mark was grounded when his parents got home because of the mess that was caused that night. I'm glad I experienced this, but there is no way I would ever use a Ouija board again.
The Haunted Room.
This happened in 2014, the year my daughter was born. It all began when we first moved into our house, which was built in the early 2000s. I was still pregnant at the time. While moving in, I noticed that the light in our daughter's room would be left on when many times we switched it off. I brushed it off as an accident or maybe an electrical problem until a few months later, after my daughter was born. We settled into our new home and made the room above the garage our hangout spot. One day, while my husband watched our 4-month-old daughter, he told me while he was in the rocking chair, he thought he saw me making my way to the garage really slow. He said he felt as if something was off. He called out my name, but he said I didn't turn around. He distinctively remembered seeing my dark brown hair. When he got up and went to the garage, there was no one there. He checked the upstairs hangout room, but again, no one was there. This really creeped us out, but somehow we were able to move past it. However, when our daughter had to have surgery 6 months later, our friend volunteered to house sit for us while we were in the hospital. He had been resting on the futon in the hangout room when he felt something aggressively hitting the futon mattress. Again, we never told him about our experiences in the house, but our heart sank when he messaged my husband asking us if our house was haunted. With everything going on with our daughter at the time, the last thing we wanted to hear was confirmation that our house was haunted. From that point on, whenever I was in the hangout room, I felt this unnerving sensation you get when you're being watched. I always had that feeling only when I was near that room. Sometimes I would be in the garage doing something and have a glance up to see the closet door in the hangout room cracked open, even though I vividly remember closing it. Small things like this may not sound too alarming or scary, but in the back of my mind, I knew that there was an unwelcomed presence in my house. I imagined that something was just behind that closet door staring right at me. We had to deal with that dark presence until the day we moved out of there. Thankfully, we haven't seen or felt anything ever since then.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. A house in Texas.
Hi, my name is Jesse, and I have lived in Texas for most of my life, until now. Growing up there wasn't exactly ideal, and I didn't have the best relationship with my parents either. I pretty much dreaded coming home from school every day. There were so many scary things going on at home. I'm going to share with you a series of strange events that happened to me when I was growing up. First of all, when I was about 6 years old, back then I used to play with the flashlight in the dark without a care in the world. However, on this night when I pointed my flashlight at the wall besides my bed, I saw something horrific. There was a shadow figure standing in the doorway. Naturally, I immediately pointed my light toward the figure, but the light was not able to illuminate it. At the time, I really didn't understand. As I lowered the flashlight, I could see the figure's rough outline. It seemed to have a dark outline. Just then, it suddenly started moving towards me. I was absolutely terrified. Seeing this thing as an adult would be terrifying. How much more as a kid? I didn't know how to process it. The last thing I remember doing was turning off the flashlight and running into my parents' room. I still don't know how I made it past the shadow of terror. Of course, my mom didn't believe me, and even as a kid, I knew that I couldn't go to my parents with stuff like this. A few years later, I was in middle school, and I was having a sleepover at my place with a friend. We went to the garage to grab some snacks and drinks after watching a movie. It was really late, so it was pretty dark. Once we entered, I sensed something was watching us. "I think we should get out of here," my friend said. My friend could also feel the unwelcomed presence. We quickly grabbed our stuff and were about to exit the garage when I pointed my flashlight near the mattresses that were leaning against the wall to the left. That's when we saw something quickly duck behind the mattresses to avoid the light. It was also that dark figure that I had saw before. We immediately shut the door and locked it. We then sat back down in the living room. We asked ourselves, what the hell did we just witness? I looked over to the clock and it was exactly 3:03 a.m. The last encounter was a week after my grandmother had passed away. She lived with us at the time. I remember that I went to the living room to use the computer and chat online. After a while, I heard a door open. I assumed that it was just my mom or dad using the bathroom. 15 minutes later, I got that strange feeling, the same feeling I felt the night my friend slept over. I got up and walked past the kitchen and dining room table and peeked into my grandmother's room, which was connected to the hallway. The door was slightly open. A dreadful feeling formed in the pit of my stomach. Something told me that if I didn't close that door, something scary would happen to me. So I quietly walked down the hallway to my grandmother's room. I was petrified as I quickly closed the door. I made it back to the living room where I stayed until the sun came back up. I'm so glad that I got out of that house, and I'm now living with my boyfriend. Who knows what else would have happened if I stayed there?
The woman in a white dress.
Hi, my name is Catherine, and this happened in 2012 in El Paso, Texas. When I was 20 years old, I was working as a supervisor at a store, and I got off of work late, around 3 o'clock a.m. I got into my car and I took the usual way home, which was down a dark, long, quiet back road that led all the way back to my house. Everything was going as usual until I spotted a figure. A figure walking in the distance. As I drove closer to it, it appeared to be a woman walking alongside the road dressed in all white. Upon seeing the woman, I got goosebumps going all the way down to my legs. Seeing the woman walking all by herself, I started to feel a little creeped out. At this point, I was really close to her, but I still had not seen her face yet. As I approached even closer, I got a better look at her since she was walking right beside the driver's window. She had long, black, messy hair that was blocking most of her face. She appeared to be barefoot. I was petrified. Then, as I drove exactly parallel to her, she turned towards me and I was finally able to see her face. There was no face, no mouth, or no eyes. It was just a pale face. I floored it, and the second I passed her, my worst nightmare came to life as the woman began running right beside my window. My heart was racing. I pressed down on the accelerator as much as I possibly could, but the terrifying woman kept pace with my car, never leaving the window. My mind could not process what was happening. I started praying out loud and tried my hardest not to look out the window or to pay attention to my peripheral vision. I didn't want to see her, although I could see that she was looking straight into my window. Eventually, the woman vanished from view. I then looked into my rearview mirror to see the white figure just standing there watching me until I was out of sight. I finally made it home sobbing and running into my husband's arms. I told him everything that happened, and to my surprise and horror, he said that he had once taken that same back road home one night and also saw a woman with long black hair wearing a white dress walking alongside the road, but for whatever reason, she didn't chase after him. I still have no idea who or what that woman is. I can only guess that it was a ghost of a woman that died alongside that dark road. What I do know is that I'm extremely lucky to have escaped her clutches. I never go down that road, and whoever happens to drive down that road at night alone, may God be with them.
The legends.
This took place many years ago, around October or November in the late 1990s, when my family and I often spent our winter holidays in a cabin in a small town in Australia. We went there because we missed the cool winters from our hometown. The town is very old, with over 150 years of history. Like many small towns with a lot of history, come local legends. These have grown over time, and one of those legends turned out to be real. We rented a cabin. It was next to an old farmhouse with a lot of land. To reach the cabin, you had to walk up a steep dirt road. This road also led to the farmhouse. The dirt road was connected to one of the main streets in the town, which had a few small shops and a local bar. I decided to visit the bar to catch up with a good friend of mine who lives in the area. My friend and I had a great time talking and laughing, but I made sure not to drink because I had to drive early the following morning. Around midnight, I had decided it was time to head back to the cabin and get some sleep. The cabin was only about 15-minute walk away. After saying goodbye, I started walking back. As I was walking, I realized not driving my car was a bad idea. The temperature was about 5 degrees Celsius, and I was only wearing a thin sweater. It was freezing, and I started to regret my decision. When I finally reached the entrance to the driveway, a sense of uncertainty crept over me. The dirt road had no streetlights, so everything around me was pitch black, making it hard to see even a few steps ahead of me. I pulled out my phone and switched on the flashlight. That's when I felt something was off. Almost as if on cue, fog started to drift in from nowhere. At first it was a light mist swirling gently around the ground, but within minutes, it grew thicker and thicker, until it turned into a heavy fog. The air around me felt damp, and I could barely see the driveway anymore. The fog didn't stop. It came so dense that even my flashlight could not pierce through it. I decided to stop walking as I knew there was a ditch ahead with a pond on the bottom. The last thing I wanted was to fall in, and no one was there to help me. As I stood there freezing and scared, with every passing second, I noticed a small amber light in the distance. It was a lantern slowly coming down the driveway. The light continuously flickered through the thick fog. Then I heard a voice, soft but clear, calling through the fog. "Son, is that you? Come out of the fog. Follow the lamp." I thought it was my mom, even though I couldn't see her yet. But I felt a sense of relief at least hearing her voice. I decided to trust the light and started following it. The soft glow cut through the fog, guiding me along the dirt driveway. I walked slowly and carefully with every step for about 3 minutes. Then I saw the light climb up a set of wooden stairs, and I heard the creak of a door opening. That's when I knew I was very close to the cabin. The light suddenly went out. I kept walking in the direction I had last seen it, calling out to my mom to turn the light back on, but there was no reply. I kept walking until I bumped into a wooden guardrail and some steps. I climbed up the steps, and as soon as I reached the top, my knees felt extremely weak. I realized I was standing on the doorstep of the old, abandoned farmhouse. The door was open and swinging in the wind, making a creepy creaking sound. Then suddenly, I heard a voice coming from inside the house. It said, "My son, welcome home." The voice was calm and almost inviting, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. It didn't sound like my mom's anymore. It had a clear British accent, and it was much deeper than hers. I felt my heart race as I realized I would much rather be out in the fog alone and cold then standing on the doorstep of this house, coming from inside. I quickly ran down the stairs, but then I heard the voice yelling, "My son, where are you going?" I started to sprint, but as I was running, I hit my foot and leg on something hard, and I fell flat on the ground. I scraped my knee badly and had cuts all over my hands. When I looked around, I realized that I didn't trip on a stone. I had tripped over a tombstone. That's when I screamed. I jumped up and started running again, calling out for my parents. After a while, I slowed down to a jog, still scared but trying to keep moving. I stopped running, thinking I had finally gotten far enough from the house to be safe. Suddenly, small amber lights, at least 6 of them, started to appear in the faraway distance. My heart pounded as I realized there was no way out, but then I noticed a small gap between the lights. Without thinking, I bolted for it. Adrenaline kicked in, and I ran as fast as I could. My mind raced, and every sound made me more terrified. Then, out of nowhere, I slammed into something hard, and my head took the full impact. It was a solid wall, and the force knocked me back, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. Then I blacked out, and the next thing I remember was my dad waking me up. He told me he heard something hit the cabin, which made him come outside to check. When he looked around, he saw a small amber light flickering near the farmhouse through all the fog. That was the end of my night, and the last time we ever stayed near that cabin. We decided not to leave early the next morning so I could get rest and recover during the day. I called my friend and invited him to visit. I hoped he could help me understand what I saw and what my dad saw that night. My friend began telling me the story connected to the house. According to him, when the town was first being built in the 19th century, that farmhouse was one of the first ones to be constructed. A well-known woman named Annie lived there with her son. Then one day she allowed her son to play with his friends on the main road. He said, as it started to get late, Annie the mother didn't hear from her son. She became more and more worried. Then heavy fog began to roll in, making everything hard to see. She decided to take her kerosene lamp and go look for her son. She walked down the main street. She could hear his footsteps, and she called out, telling him to follow the light of the lamp. But when she made it back to the house, her son wasn't with her. The next morning, they found him at the bottom of the pond, and he had hit his head hard. He was lifeless. The grave near the farmhouse is said to be her son's, and people say that on cold winter nights, she still searches for her son. She is said to trick men from the pub, thinking they are her lost son, and leads them into the fog, never to be seen again. 2 years ago, my husband, our 2 young daughters, and I rented a house in Tucson, Arizona for spring break. It had a heated saltwater pool, a hot tub, and it was 4 bedrooms. Since we were coming from a cold place, we were excited to enjoy the warm weather. On our first night in the house, I had a very clear and strange dream. In the dream, I was standing in the dark. Then an old woman opened the door, and I realized I was inside a small pantry or some kind of closet. The doors were foldable and made of oak. To my right, there were shelves filled with different items. The woman and the items didn't seem important. What mattered was the house, and I was in the kitchen closet. To the left, past the kitchen, was the front door. The carpet was green, and a short wall separated this area from a lower level. After that, my memory becomes unclear. I remember small details, but not too much. The dream wasn't that special on its own, but it felt extremely real. In the morning, I walked to the kitchen and checked for a foldable pantry door, like in my dream, but there was nothing. No pantry or closet, just drawers and cabinets. I had a strange feeling that someone was watching me. I thought about my dream about standing in the closet and watching the old woman. Now, during the day, we spent most of our time outside, either exploring trails or swimming in the pool. But after a while, I started avoiding going inside the house as a feeling of being watched didn't go away. From the master bedroom, I could see down the hallway and the doors to the other 3 bedrooms. On the second night, my youngest daughter cried out in the middle of the night. I found her on the floor, curled up, shivering and crying. I thought that she had fallen out of bed, so I picked her up and put her back. On the 3rd night, I was in bed, probably online shopping for things. My husband was asleep, and I left the door open so I could see down the hallway. Then I heard the doors opening and closing, which wasn't unusual since our 2 daughters liked to get up a few times before falling asleep. But it wasn't late, almost midnight, and I was about to go to bed. I heard a doorknob rattle and a whisper saying, "Who are you?" It was a soft, childlike voice, but it sounded distant, as if it came from down the hallway. I looked up from my phone and saw that my older daughter's bedroom door was slightly open. Right away, I had a strong feeling that the door had barely just opened and that someone or something had gone inside, but then I tried to think logically, thinking maybe the door had already been open and she was just talking in her sleep. I walked down the hallway and stepped into her room. She was fast asleep, not moving or mumbling at all. She was fast asleep, not moving or mumbling at all. At that moment, whether from fear or something else, I felt on edge. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the living room to calm myself down. Part of me tried to stay calm, telling myself to breathe and relax. After all, I'm an adult, but the other part of me was petrified. I know this sounds crazy, but I had a strong feeling that something wanted to scare her, and I wanted to be there just in case. That's when I heard it, a clear, loud whisper. It came from right beside me, as if a child was trying to get a friend's attention. It didn't sound threatening, but it was so close and so clear that I froze, and my eyes widened in fear. It felt like I was trying to block out reality while holding back a scream, but I had to keep my eyes open, searching for where the voice had come from. I shook my husband. He was only half awake when I whispered, "Did you hear that?" But he had been asleep and, of course, hadn't heard anything. I didn't tell him the whole story until the next day. I didn't want to scare my daughter, and I stayed awake as long as I could, keeping the bedside lamp and hallway lights on. Eventually, my husband rolled over and told me to turn off the light, so I did and went to sleep. The next day, I felt on edge. The feeling of being watched was even stronger. There were times I almost expected to look up and see a cat or a creature just staring at me. It was a feeling I had never experienced before. I had a tingling along my neck and down my spine that night. I prayed over both of my daughters before bed and used pillows to keep the doors open. As far as I remember, we all slept peacefully. I was so relieved to leave the next day. My husband still thinks I'm imagining things, and none of the other reviews mentioned anything strange about the house. I thought about writing an honest review and all the paranormal things that happened, but I felt too embarrassed. I even looked up the address to see if anything from the past could explain what happened, but I found nothing.
Scary, true, paranormal story number 3, The Glitch.
I can't really explain what happened or how it ended because neither of us knows. I was about 8 years old and my brother was 10 years old when we had just moved into a new home in 2003. Before we moved in, our parents made sure everything was ready. They cleaned up the place, set up the furniture, and made it feel like home. The place wasn't very big, but it had enough space for all of us. The walls still had marks from the previous tenants, and the rooms had an old smell like someone had lived there for a long time. My brother and I shared a room, and on our first night there, something weird happened. I won't say it was a ghost because how it ended makes no sense. So around 2 o'clock in the morning, we both woke up to a loud noise. The bedroom TV kept turning on and off, showing only static. The main lights flickered again and again, and the cupboards and drawers opened and closed on their own, as if someone was moving them. We both were shocked and scared, screaming for our parents. When they didn't answer, after about 30 seconds, we ran out of the room and into theirs. They were in bed, but something felt wrong. The room was freezing cold. We shook them and shouted right next to them to wake up, but they didn't wake up. Their skin felt cold, like they had been outside in the snow. The last thing I remember from that night was looking through my parents' bedroom door in the hallway. Instead of darkness, there was a bright white light, almost like the whole hallway was glowing. My brother doesn't remember seeing it, so it seems like I was the only one who did. The next thing we knew, we were back in our beds, and it was around 8 o'clock in the morning. When my brother shook me awake, we stared at each other for a moment, trying to understand what had happened. We knew it wasn't a dream, because we both experienced it. We ran to our parents' room again and woke them up. This time they woke up, and we told them everything while crying, because we were so petrified. We never found out what really happened or why it happened. After that night, we stayed at our grandma's house for about a week. When we finally went back home, nothing like that ever happened again. At least not as bad as that night. My dad never believed in ghosts, but even he sometimes heard strange footsteps in the hallway. He also saw a shadow-like figure standing near the bathroom door. Our family struggled financially, so moving wasn't possible, but over time we got used to it. Besides, the strange sounds and things we saw now and then really didn't bother us too much. My brother and I are still sure about what happened that first night, and we have no idea how we got back in bed. But it did happen, and I can tell you for sure, this is 100% true.
The Visitor.
Back in 2003, when I was around 16 years old, my family was checking out a house. The owners showed up to talk with my parents. The man seemed like a nice older man and mentioned that he had built the house himself. I stayed back watching as everyone talked while the owner was chatting and laughing with my parents. There was a moment when the conversation paused. Then suddenly he turned away from them, and his expression completely changed. His happy face turned into the most sinister and hateful look I had ever seen. I don't think he saw me watching. I was on my phone with my head looking down, but I was keeping an eye on him the whole time. As soon as he turned back to my parents, his face changed again, and he started smiling and laughing like nothing happened. It gave me the creeps, and I felt a chill go throughout my body. Later, I told my mom about what I saw. She agreed. It was weird, but said maybe he was just socially awkward. She didn't seem too weird about it. We ended up buying the house after all, thinking it was a great deal and a nice place to live. After we moved in, things seemed normal at first. Then came the small noises I would hear at night. It was mainly me that heard these noises and sounds, like dishes being moved around. The one weekend, my family decided to go to church. I wasn't in the mood to go, so I told them I'd stay home. They didn't mind and left me there alone in the house. It was Sunday morning. Around 10 o'clock a.m. I heard a really loud banging outside. The sound was consistent and coming from the side of the house. I was upstairs on the other side of the house, so I couldn't see what it was. Honestly, I thought it was probably just the wind, since it was a stormy and windy day. I didn't think much about it and ignored it. About 5 minutes later, the banging stopped. Then, about 10 minutes later, I started hearing footsteps downstairs. It sounded like someone walking around. I could hear chairs being moved in the kitchen and even the fridge door being opened. I was petrified. I knew it was not my parents. I knew it wasn't my parents because they messaged me when they got to church. I quietly locked my bedroom door, trying not to make any noise. I grabbed my baseball bat from the corner of the room. Then I picked up my phone and called 911. My hands shaking as I told them my address and explained what was happening. While I was on call, I sent a quick text to my mom. I tried to stay calm, but then I heard footsteps coming towards the stairs. The house is pretty thin, so I could hear exactly where the sounds were coming from at the time. My mom texted back saying she was on her way home. My mom was 30 minutes away. There I was, a 16-year-old girl hiding in the room. I was so scared, I could barely think straight. I then heard something walking down the hallway, getting closer to my door. Then I saw the handle turn. It stopped because the door was locked. I heard a voice on the other side ask me to open the door. It was my grandma's voice. It just stood there. Whatever it was did not move. Those 30 seconds felt like a lifetime. That's when I heard it walk back down the hallway. Then I heard the back door open and shut. About 3 minutes later, the police arrived, and the 911 operator asked if I could let them in or if they needed to break in. Since I was sure it had left, I went downstairs and let them in. They checked the whole entire house, and there was no one there. No signs of forced entry at all. It was like whoever or whatever it was just disappeared. The creepiest part, and what really proved my story, was the hallway. My mom had just vacuumed it earlier, but now there was prints on the floor. It was large footprints. They led to my door, but there was no footprints walking away from my door. I was so confused, and I didn't know how this was possible that the prints stopped right outside my bedroom door. We changed the locks the next day and added extra security, but I never felt safe in that house again. Even now, I get chills thinking about how close I was to whatever was on the other side of my door.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. The Haunted House.
My wife and I bought a house in Rolla, Missouri, which was built in 1992. Now, the first owner passed away in 2012 after having a serious illness. While he was sick, he stayed in a room that wasn't the master bedroom. His wife lived there for many years. After he was gone, she didn't want to sell the house, but had to because she couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. When we first started moving in, we stayed at a hotel 20 miles away. The house used to be a ranch and is deep in the countryside. Once in the house, I turned on a hallway light and I left it on all day and night, but I found it turned off 3 times that same day. This hallway is very dark, and it's near the bedroom and bathroom where the man stayed when he was sick. My wife and I were busy moving in, so we kept going back and forth between Walmart, the hotel, and grabbing food during the day. It was a lot of running around, and we were both tired. When I finally got back to the house, I noticed the hallway light was off again. I casually asked my wife if she had turned it off. She looked confused and said no. Earlier that same day, I was the first one to go into the house while my wife was in the barn 200 feet away. We had left our dogs in the laundry room overnight, and this was the first time we came back to the house. That day, I went out onto the back patio through the sliding door and opened the outside door to the laundry room to let the dogs out. I stepped into the laundry room and closed the door behind me. I couldn't turn the laundry door handle. The handle doesn't lock, but I couldn't move it at all. It wouldn't budge, so I went back out to the patio and into the house through the sliding door. When I tried to open the laundry door from the inside, it easily opened, with no problem at all. The door and hardware are in great shape, almost like new. Maybe this means nothing, but to me, this was strange. I decided to leave the hallway light on again. We went out for dinner and came back. That night, we put the pugs in the laundry room and left for the hotel. I made sure the door was shut. The next day, we found the pugs had gotten out of the laundry room and chewed up several things. Now, we had an ADT alarm system with motion detectors inside, but it never went off, although the dogs were all over the house. So in this case, how can a small dog reach up and pull down on the door handle? To open the door, it has to be pulled down and opens towards you. The dogs are not tall enough to reach the handle, so how could the dogs get out of that room? What's strange is that every time we got back, the door was always closed when the dogs got out. I gave the handle a quick pull down. The fourth night, I was going to open the door to the bedroom that the owner stayed in before he went to hospice. I pulled down on the door handle, but it wouldn't move. Not only was it stuck, but the door didn't have any give at all. Before this, the door had a little movement. When I tried to go in the room, it felt like something on the other side was using all its strength to push against the door. I couldn't get in. The handle wouldn't move. I pushed on it, but then suddenly it gave way, like someone or something on the other side quickly let it go. This was really scary, and I almost ran outside to my wife. I was so scared. I can't even explain it right now. We aren't living in the house because it flooded a few weeks ago. We're back in Texas waiting for the house to get repaired. Since we've been here in Texas, the alarm has gone off several times. The last alarm went off a few days ago. The alarm company said the front door was open and there was motion in the front room. We still want to live there, even after the house is repaired. As believers, we're not sure what to do. We tried blessing the house, but some of this strange stuff has happened even after we left. Evil definitely exists, but I don't want it in my house. A few months ago, my mother, brother, and I moved to West Texas after we finished high school. We ended up in a neighborhood mostly filled with older people. Our house used to belong to an elderly couple, but they didn't pass away, they just moved out. In the first year of living there, not too much strange stuff happened. The only thing was hearing footsteps in my mom's bedroom upstairs while I was in the basement. I was the only one home, so it was odd. I tried to tell myself it was just house noises, but I didn't really believe that. That same year on Thanksgiving, I was in charge of loading all the food we made into the car that was parked in the driveway. It was a chilly morning, and I was rushing a little to make sure everything fit without messing up the pies or casseroles. As I carefully placed the last pie in the car, I suddenly heard an older woman's voice behind me. She said, "You'd better be careful with that." She sounded like she was teasing me. I clearly remember rolling my eyes, since I was facing the house and had my back towards her. I put on a smile ready to turn around and chat with her, but when I turned around, there was no one there. I looked around and thought maybe the old woman had been walking by and moved along, but I didn't see anyone. For a moment I thought I must have imagined it, but it's still too real to be imagined. I figured it had to be my brother playing a joke on me, maybe pretending to sound like an older lady. I checked the porch and the garage to find him, but he wasn't there either. My mom came outside right then, and I asked her if she had told me to be careful. She said no and looked confused. I think that was the day I started to believe in ghosts or whatever that was. A month later, during winter break, I was back home, curled up in my bed. Everything was quiet until I suddenly heard a soft sobbing sound coming from somewhere nearby. The crying sounded muffled, so I thought it might be my mom. I was about to go check on her when she texted me, "Hey, are you okay?" I replied yes, and why did she ask that? She said she heard the crying also and thought it was me. I told her it wasn't me and that I thought it was her or maybe the dog. She said no, it wasn't her, and that the dog was asleep at the end of her bed. We both decided it must have been the wind, or maybe a coyote, but to me it sounded way too human and way too sad to be either of those. Then one day I asked my mom what she thought about everything, the footsteps, the old woman, and the crying sounds. She said she thinks it might be Grandma. You see, my grandmother had passed away about 6 months after we moved into our new house.